What is open contract when you join the military, and should you do it? Now, I see a ton of misinformation about this online, and I'm going to just try to break through what this really means, some reasons you might want to do it, some reasons you might not want to do it. I spent 3 years as a recruiter for the Marine Corps, so I've got a little bit of knowledge of this. I did have to send a few applicants as open contract, and it is what it is. That being said, it's not always the greatest option. Sometimes it works out great. And there are some other MOSs that you probably don't realize are basically open contract in hiding. So stick around and find out what it is and whether you should do it right now. So I will throw this out there. I do a ton of videos online about, different jobs in the Marine Corps and the military. And there's always all these negative comments about open contract guarantees you cook or blah, 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 blah. No, it doesn't. So we're going to just talk about what the open contract is and why you may or may not be open to doing open contract. That's redundant, but you know what I mean, right? So open contract is this. It is basically you signing a piece of paper that says, I want to be a Marine or an airman or a seaman or a soldier or a coastie or a whatever, insert branch of service, so badly that I don't care about the job. Just put me in, coach. And that honestly is fine for some people. There are plenty of people who join the military and really could give a rat's ass about what job they get, so much as they get to serve their country, leave their hometown, whatever. For some people, the motivation for joining that branch of service or any branch of service is so great, they really do not care about their job. For other people, the job is the only thing they care about, those skill sets that they're going to learn in the service. And so for those people, obviously, I would say probably don't go open contract, but this is kind of what open contract means. And we're going to dig into, why you may or may not do it. And then also I'm going to read through a list of the most common places you end up open contract per branch of service, just so you guys have a more realistic expectation of what to expect with this. So again, when you go open contract, this is you basically saying, I don't care about my job, just put me in. This generally is for somebody who fits one of a few categories. Either I want to go to boot camp like freaking yesterday, put me in, let me get out of town, I don't care, I want in, whatever. Because the way that, now every branch is a little bit different, but the way that this works is essentially at the beginning of the fiscal year, which is October 1st, every year, all of the new jobs for that fiscal year, October 1st through September 30th of the following year, open up, right? And so that's generally because they're aiming for seniors in high school who are going to be graduating high school and then starting to go to boot camp, mainly that summer, following by the fall. And so all of those job opportunities open up for seniors who are joining the military their senior year, August, September, October, November, December, and they get those fiscal year, October on jobs. And so like in the Marine Corps, for example, the fastest filling MOS for me when I was a recruiter, and again, this was 10 years ago, so things change, was infantry. Everybody wanted to be infantry. Not everybody, but a very large amount of people want to join the Marine Corps, be Marine Corps infantry, say they were a grunt, do the thing. And so those infantry jobs fill up very quickly. And then we start having to play this shuffle game where it's like, hey, if you want to go to boot camp now, essentially it comes down to a conversation where it's like, hey, if you really want infantry, the next infantry spot I have open is July of the following year. You can take that spot. But if you want to go to boot camp today or, next month, whatever, right? As fast as humanly possible, there's not an infantry spot. Now, on some occasions, you could sign up for that infantry spot and then do a swap with another applicant who also had infantry and wanted to ship later. So you could postpone their ship date, move yours up, swap, keep the same job. In other cases, you could swap the job and, there's all these things that recruiters can do to really try to help you get the job you want. But at the end of the day, if 100,000 people join the Marine Corps this year, which is not our recruiting mission, just making up random numbers here, and all 100,000 want to be infantry, Marine Corps is going to be like, no, 15,000 of you can be infantry, and the other 10,000 of you can be motor T, and that's only 25,000. The other 75,000, here's what we got. Pick a job. Because whether you like it or not, there are quotas for jobs. And I don't mean that recruiters have to enlist for, on the officer side. Yeah, that's exactly how it is. They'll be like, I need 3 JAGs, 2 pilots, 1 doctor, and we don't care, extra person, right? Whatever. But on the enlisted side, it's not nearly that specific on the recruiting role. It's more of a, in order for the job to work properly, the Marine Corps knows we have to have 7% of this job and 3% of this job and 17% of this job. And I'm not going to speculate on what those big time numbers are, but certain percentages of the Marine Corps equal certain jobs. Some job fields only have 300, 400, 500 people in the entire Marine Corps. Like EOD, or explosive ordnance disposal, is less than, last I checked, less than 1,000 Marines out of like 200 plus thousand Marines in total service, right? And so that's a very small piece of the pie. That said, you can't actually join EOD until you've been in the service for a few years, whereas motor transportation is the single largest MOS in the Marine Corps, and it makes up a pretty significant chunk of people. So if you want to be Motor T, chances are you probably can. But if you want this very obscure small job, like let's call it air traffic control, it's much less likely that we can just guarantee that specific skill set. Plus, you've got to meet certain tests and criteria and scores in order to get that. And so this is where it kind of plays in, right? Some people, shipping to boot camp immediately, leaving, getting started, all that stuff is more important than their job. And so what they'll do is they'll go to boot camp, figure out what they get, and then they understand that there are lateral moves, which I'll make another video on, down the road, which means you can change your job. So after 2 years, 3 years in the Marine Corps, you can be like, hey, I'm going to re-enlist, but I really want that job. I'm qualified. I'll take a spot. You move into that MOS, and then you go on about your day. There are people who are totally fine with that. They don't care. And so for those people, open contract is a great thing because it gets you out the door, lets you get started on your career. And, you may love the job you get. And if you don't, you can change it down the road. Now, that's not a guarantee, but it is possible. It does happen all the time. If you're not in our school community yet and you want to join a really cool, small community where we help service members and vets learn the basics of finance and real estate and investing and setting yourself up for success, I'll drop the QR code right here. And come on, join us. It's an awesome community. Now, the military is going to do this, like I said, based on the job availability, how fast you're going to boot camp, what jobs are open at boot camp, and the needs of the Marine Corps. And some things will change. Like, let's say you're at boot camp and a guy who's on an intelligence contract doesn't make it through boot camp. He gets hurt. He's just a little whiny whatever and quits, for whatever reason, doesn't make it through. He pops on, he gets high right before he goes to boot camp and pops on the drug test and gets kicked out. That person, that job field that was supposed to come out of boot camp is open. And if you're on open contract, they may, if you meet all the scores, be like, yeah, you get this intel job, or hey, you get this infantry job. Like, it's actually pretty common that you end up infantry on open contract. I'll show you that in a minute. And because there's a lot of people going, and so the likelihood that someone doesn't make it through training and that job opens up is possible, right? So if you roll your dice and go open contract, you could very well get a decent job. It is not by any means that open contract is all the garbage job nobody wants. That's not the case. In fact, often you get pretty good opportunities. And for some people, the option for open contract may not even be because of time to ship. It may be like, let's say you have a color vision issue and you're just like, God, that limited 90% of the jobs I could do. I don't really like any of these. I don't care. Just get me out the door, and they still want to join the Marine Corps. So open contract might be a good option. All right. So this is kind of how this works. Now, a few notes here. Your ASVAB score plays a role in what you get qualified for as open contract. You still have to qualify for that job. So if you have a really low ASVAB score, that's going to limit some of the occupations you could take. If you have a really high ASVAB score and you go open contract, you could still get some really cool stuff. If you pass the DLAB, which is the Defense Language Aptitude Battery Test, like the language test that crypto and intel and linguists have to take, you could even end up in one of those job fields. So there are a lot of cool opportunities out there depending on where you fall in this realm. And obviously, the fitter and the more intelligent you are when you go to boot camp, the better job opportunity on the open contract side may exist. And just for reference, this is not like you sign an open contract, you get a job. This is like you sign open contract, you'll find out maybe at the end of boot camp, maybe at AIT as the Army calls it, or at Marine Combat Training as the Marine Corps calls it, what your job is. It's going to be down the road. And so by that time, you might even have, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but there's even a possibility that your drill instructor, if they like you, might sit you down and be like, hey, these are the 3 jobs that were open for open contract. Do you like any of them? And you may still have a choice in that matter, right? It's just kind of a roll the dice, Rochambeau, see what happens thing. So you just have to be okay with that internally. And I basically did this. I didn't do open contract, but I was going to be infantry. I wanted to ship early. They offered me Motor T. I jumped on it. I would have probably been okay with open contract at that point because I just wanted to be a Marine and I just wanted to leave, right? I grew up in Podunk, Arkansas, and I wanted to see the world. And so I almost ended up being one of these people. It just happened that the job they offered me was one that I actually liked, so I didn't have to go open contract, right? I was like, oh yeah, I'll take that to ship early. One thing that I do want to note here that a lot of people don't understand about the open contract, and this isn't actually open contract, this is as it refers to all these cool kid things, right? So if you go on a Marine Corps reconnaissance contract or a BUDS like Navy SEALs contract or any of these like super special schools that you have to pass to earn the MOS, maybe that's nuke, sub, whatever. Every branch has a few of these. The most common would be like SEALs, or for the Marine Corps, it's reconnaissance. If you go to boot camp on a recon contract and then you don't make it through recon, you might as well have been open contract, because then it'll be needs of the Marine Corps, you'll get stuck in something else. This is actually why when people want to join the Marine Corps, I always recommended that they go on an infantry contract. Because if you go on an infantry contract and then at infantry school, right, like the School of Infantry after boot camp, you volunteer to try out for reconnaissance. If you fail recon, then you drop back to that infantry MOS. But if you go on a reconnaissance contract and you fail recon, you don't have a fallback and you're basically open contract, right? So that's kind of how this works. For SEALs, they jokingly call them BUD studs. And a lot of the times, BUD studs, or people who didn't make it through SEALs, end up being corpsmen, actually, which is like a Navy nurse, right? So it's not a bad job. But if you think about it, you joined to like be a Navy SEAL and now you're a nurse, not quite as cool. You could be a green side and be with a Marine Corps unit, even an infantry unit, and still do some cool stuff, but it's just not the same, right? And so you've got to be cognizant of the fact that, like, if you go on one of these very special contracts, like read the fine print that says, hey, if you fail, needs the Marine Corps, needs the Navy, needs the Army, that's the reality. That's basically open contract unless you make it through. And some people are like, that's fine, I'm going to make it. But the reality is a large chunk of people who go for those special schools don't make it. And so you have to be okay with the fact that if you don't make it, this is the option. For some people, it would actually be recommended to, like the quote, safer route to be infantry, try out for recon. If you make it, great. If you don't, you go back to infantry, or to be whatever MOS in the Navy you want, try out for SEALs. If you don't make it, you go back to that MOS. That could be a different route. So this is just understanding that even some job fields have a like open contract, essentially caveat if you fail school. Right. So essentially I kind of touched on what, why the reasons people go open contract and what it is and how it works. Long, short, if you don't want to go open contract, talk to a recruiter earlier rather than later, do well on your ASVAB, be in shape, and get a job that you really want and desire, and be proactive about it rather than reactive and making like a last minute decision to join the service. Because the later in that senior year or the later in life that you join, the less likely you're going to be like the person who gets the first choice for jobs, right? That said, I'm going to go over here. We're going to look through this list. I pulled a bunch of info and then I went through ChatGPT and I cross-referenced, and I'm going to kind of read through like over the last few years, historically, the most common job fields you may end up in based on the needs of that service. So we're just going to kind of read through this real quick. And again, this is not end all be all. Like me saying these are the 5 most common does not mean this is what you're going to get, but this will give you an idea for what you're actually looking at, more than when just people say you're going to be a cook. Because while that is a job field that is often on the list, it's not always the top one. Watch this. In the Marine Corps, the top 5 jobs that you could land if you go open contract based on this, right? Most common: infantry, kind of told you guys that already. Motor transportation, which was my job field, and I mentioned that as well because that's actually so for reference, infantry is the largest like conglomerate of MOSs, like as a whole. But inside of infantry, you've got machine gunner, mortarman, rifleman, whatever, saltman. And so there's different job fields in infantry, but if you group all of infantry together, it is the largest MOS. The largest single MOS is motor transportation operator, and then motor transportation mechanic. If you throw those two together, those two are still a little smaller than infantry, but individually transportation operator is the biggest MOS in the Marine Corps. So infantry, motor transportation, supply and logistics is number 3. Number 4 is food service specialist, or food, basically cook, right? That is on the list. And then number 5 actually is artillery, or ARTI, which is probably surprising to some of y'all. So you've got infantry, motor transportation, supply and logistics, food specialist, and artillery. Those are the top 5 in the Marine Corps. Not all bad choices. And if you watch my video I did a little bit ago on cook, there's actually some really cool opportunities in the Marine Corps as a food service specialist. So I'm not even hating on that. Now in the Army, the number 1 is culinary specialist or cook. Number 2 is supply specialist. Number 3 is motor transportation again. So that's that 88 Mike. Number 4 is actually a petroleum supply specialist, so like a refueler. And the number 5 is the CBurn guy, which is like the chemical biological reactor. Like those are the guys who do all your gas chamber stuff and test gas masks and stuff like that. So a totally different list for the Army. All right, so I'm starting to see why people say cook. So for the Navy, number 1 is culinary specialist, cook. Number 2 is logistics specialist. Number 3 is boatswain's mate, which is basically like deckhand duties and scrubbing boats and doing all the things and running the boat and whatever. Number 4 is yeoman, which is admin and paperwork. And number 5 is your aviation ordnance man, right? So again, for the Army and the Navy, cook is definitely number 1. For the Marine Corps, it's number 4, which is why in my experience, I would say it's not as often that you get cook. In fact, as the Marine Corps recruiter side of me, I sent probably 7 people to boot camp on, no, probably not that much. I don't know, 4 to 7 people on open contract. Not one of them ended up as a cook, right? That said, here we go. The Air Force. Services. Now, this is not food services. This is services in general. So this is food, so cook, lodging, fitness center, mortuary affairs, like just kind of services in general. They rope it all together. You've got material management, which is supply chain and logistics. You've got security forces, which is their military police, essentially. Ground transportation, right? And then fuel, right? So refueler. You'll notice a common trend here. It's basically infantry, transportation, logistics, supply, food. Those are kind of the big ticket because they are very large job fields in each branch of service. People think about infantry when they think about the Marine Corps, but the support element is much larger than the frontline element in the Marine Corps, and same in any other branch of service. And then in the Coast Guard, we've got food service, boatswain's mate, seaman, which is another deckhand option, fireman, which is actually pretty sick, right? Engineering support, and then storekeeper. Okay, so again, essentially, this is going to come down to, when we talk about needs of the service, it really will, if you go open contract, it is most likely that you will end up as either infantry, supply, motor transportation, something in the food and or services realm, logistics, that kind of realm. All of these are careers and skill sets that you can benefit from after service. Like, I loved being motor transport, so I'm not going to hate on that. But even like the food service guys I knew in the Marine Corps, they loved it. And the logistics guys in the Marine Corps get promoted very fast. And the supply guys in the Marine Corps have great job opportunities afterwards. And so there's a lot of decent options here. It is not just like people have this connotation that if you sign open contract, your needs the service, you're going to hate your life. It's really not the case. It's pretty consistent about what those largest MOSs are. They're all job sets and job fields that have potential for you to succeed in the service, and they have options for you out of the service. So it's not like signing an open contract is a death warrant for you hating your time in the service, right? So I just want to get that out there and kind of break that stigma to you guys about what this looks like. But bottom line is this. If you want to leave town, want to join the military, want to join that specific service, and you just don't care about your job, open contract's an easy way to get out quickly and start your career, and then you can figure it out down the road. The reality is, most of us at 18 years old, what we really want out of life and want out of a job field is probably going to change while you're in the service, right? So I hope this helped break down what open contract is and whether or not you should do it. If you're on the fence, comment down below and ask questions. If you got something out of this or you learned something about it, comment down below. As always, subscribe. Love you guys. Have a great day.